Okay. Hello and a very good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining our very first tNavigator live podcast 2020. So this is a very different session and program compared to the previous webinars that we have done. And the idea is that we're trying to engage more users and make this a platform where listeners can come to and exchange their knowledge and grow as well. So we're going to talk about tNavigators and of course the current latest technology trends. And most importantly, you will get to see how we all look like. And we're also joined by tNav Tim over there, but obviously he can't say much. So the session today will be 45 minutes. It's going to be 30 minutes of discussion. We're going to talk about the future of petroleum engineering and 15 minutes of Q&A. So I'm going to brief through on how, as an attendee, how you are able to navigate yourself throughout the session. Once you have logged on, you are automatically muted. And if you have any questions in mind, kindly put those in the right side of your control panel. There's a question box. Feel free to drop any questions or inquiries in there. And if you have any inquiries or would you like to preferably have a demo on tNavigator, please reach out to us at asktnav@rfdyn.com. That is at asktnav@rfdyn.com. So in today's session, I'm going to introduce you to the moderators for today. Yours truly, hi. My name is Larissa Zimmer. I am in charge of rock flow dynamics commercial needs for the users here in Southeast Asia. That is Kuala Lumpur, Indonesia, Vietnam. And joining me today would be Mr. Derek Ong. Hi, this is our favorite reservoir engineer in the house. Would you like to tell us a bit about yourself?
Yeah, I basically, of course, we are based in Malaysia, based in Kuala Lumpur. So my name is Derek. I'm a reservoir engineer who is doing on-site support, doing some business development around Southeast Asia. So of course, I think it's our very first podcast. So I'm this first time being a co-host as well. I don't know how it's going to work, but let's hope that it is going to work well. And yeah, we always have to try something new to tackle the low oil price, to do something different.
That's great.
Yeah,
thank you, Derek. Yeah. Other than that, of course, we have a very special guest. We have Mr. Zaim Awang. Hi, nice to have you today.
Yeah, it's my pleasure to be here.
Thank you so much. Mr. Zaim, would you like to tell us a bit more about yourself and why you have chosen the particular topic today, which is the future of petroleum engineering?
Okay, just a little bit about myself, because that would be too much. 1 hour will not be enough, right? So, yeah, I've been a reservoir engineer for more than 20 over years. I don't like to count because I consider myself young number of years. Yeah, I studied in Texas basically. Oh, it's too far out, right? But I started my work at Shell as a reservoir engineer, and it was over 20 years ago in Miri. And then I was with Shell in Nigeria as well. And then Qatar with Maersk Oil, and Oman with Petroleum Development. And I came back maybe a little bit more than 5, 6, 7 years ago back to Malaysia. And since then been more or less most of the time as a consultant, right? Until today. Okay. And you asked me why I chose this topic, future of petroleum engineering. Apart from I've been kidnapped by you guys to be here, be released in 1 hour time.
Yeah, we literally did kidnap him.
Yeah. So this is actually a very, I think last year I said to myself, oh, things are really very different. Being in the oil and gas, things have changed quite a bit, especially with the recent turmoil and COVID-19 and the oil price. So many things have happened, and there's so many questions that I get asked especially by fresh graduates trying to get into the industry, and even those within the industry. You can sense that there's a lot of uncertainty, right? So I think that's what I hope to get into in this session. And also, it's very nice to talk about when the topic is future of petroleum engineering, because I will not be proven wrong until like years to come, right?
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
So
I think
don't ask me about when it's going to happen.
Okay,
Yeah, for
maybe
me-
to prepare for that.
Yeah, I think personally, I know Zaim since I think back all the way back in 2016, and when that was the time that I joined RFD, and Zaim was like one of the very few user in Malaysia. I think probably the first 10 user that I supported. As of course, I know you through work relationship. You are as a tNav user, so well, I think the topic that we discussed today is actually very interesting. Looking from a very macro level, the future of petroleum engineering. So when we talk about this topic, particularly, I think the first thing that comes to mind is low oil price, right? The
Yeah.
low oil price and how do we deal with it? So would you mind to share about what's your view on that? How do you think technology can help to leverage on this low oil price challenge that we have today?
Okay, very interesting question, Derek.
Yeah.
So I think you touched upon a few things like the low oil price and technology.
Yep.
So I think we are definitely in a critical juncture right now in terms of availability of oil. I mean, in terms of opportunities that we have in our portfolio, they are getting more and more difficult, right? I mean, some of us just came off from drilling campaigns where the success have not been, have not been very promising. For example, it just gets more and more challenging. We're going after bypass oil in pockets and compartments which are more difficult to get. But at the same time, with the low oil price, we need to keep costs low, right? Because the margin is not that high. So then, technology is very, very key because we want to basically maximize the usage and the resource that we have. And some of the things that very, very critical includes using technology for visualization, for understanding what we're after.
What's the best technology you ever used throughout your 15 to 20 years of career?
Because
software, let's just say.
Okay, because I'm in this room, I would say.
Okay, like there's no, we're not gonna murder you or anything.
If you talk about other things, we'll censor it.
True.
Right. Okay.
Really kidnap him.
Right. Yeah, I think the very before we get to the kind of software, the most important thing is basically visualization to me.
Yeah.
I'm the kind of engineer who really needs to be able to visualize all aspects of the technical aspects that I'm working on, and we cut across different disciplines, integrate data from different sources. So visualization is very key. You want to be able to visualize as a reservoir engineer, the reservoir. You want to be able to visualize the wells. You want to be able to visualize fluid flow, right? So I think what's lacking previously was the ease of visualization. I think that's what I think I would say the number one strength to me of tNav is being able to basically you can easily go into any types of visualization with ease.
You've been using tNav for, I think I would say, I think you used tNav way before I used tNav back in 2016. Would you like to share more about that as well?
Yeah.
It's not going to be, I think it's not from Bayan project, right? You have used tNav for the other project before you joined the Bayan redevelopment JV project as well.
Indeed. That's a very interesting question because at that point in time, we wanted to understand, for example, we're talking about small columns. We wanted to understand, how the wells going to be, production is going to be affected by coilings. And we're not talking about one reservoir, we're talking about stacked reservoirs, so there's like 20 of those, right? And we want to be able to understand how, water encroaches from different directions and the coiling effect. And so visualization was very key over there, right? And especially when you start to build the model, what's typically happen is with the situations that your day one, if your well pump is not done correctly, you get water coming in. So being able to see that fault or the issues or the bugs that you put in into the model and be able to iron it out is very, very useful. So I think that was one of the key aspects, even though I think there were some engineers that say, Zaim, this is new, why you want to use this for this critical project, right? But that was not really my thinking. My thinking is that we want to solve a problem and then see what what kind of technology, what kind of tools we have available that can give us the advantage. So that was the the motivation.
Yeah, I think back to the slide. I think I saw your slide. It's talking about the oil price. So of course, I think the nearest downturn is back in 2014. That was one of the worst that it got as low as 20 to 30 a barrel per. I mean, so I think along the way from 2014 onwards, we start to see, we thought we have hope to go back to what it's like before, especially 2016. We thought it's going to back up to hundreds, but it didn't happen. So what's your view on the prediction on that? Like on your view, like for the next, within a decade, how is the trend going to be like? We call it the new, I think we call it the new normal, not just for the COVID,
Yeah.
but now also the new normal for the oil price.
Definitely. Yeah. So we talk about we didn't talk about this, but basically we do have globalization nowadays, right? And globalization has really changed things quite a bit, in a sense that we talk about supply and demand. You can easily mobilize supply from one area to the other. There's of course still logistics issue, but it gets more and more easier nowadays. And the other thing is what technology has done, for example, with the fracking, is that we have made oil supply more readily available than before. I think that's where you have the change. It used to be that you can track, Brent and other West Texas. They kind of
WTI,
they go hand in hand. But when the frac technology and oil is more readily available, you start to have the unconventional. You start to have the divergence, right? Because suddenly you have more supply from one area, from the States, for example, surpassing Saudi, for example, right? So this is a very, very challenging times, in the sense that supply in terms of oil price, because supply can be readily made available, but as long as it comes at the right price. But once that right price, once we reach the right price, then you can say that the oil will start to be mobilized and the supply will start to be balanced up with the demand, and therefore you don't really have that ridiculous $100 oil price anymore. I don't think that will happen in near future, right? And the other aspect of it is that you can see whenever we have high spikes of oil price, right? We actually see the market really punishing the oil price. It doesn't let it go for much higher.
Yeah, I think that would be like really like the key things that we start about talking about your presentation slide, right? So yeah, maybe you would like to show on what is your general overview of your future petroleum engineer from what is being shown here.
Okay, if I may have a bit of control in the slide. I know I'm a captive here, but if you then can help me there.
We have a producer in front of us, staying behind the screen. Do all the job for us.
Okay, so but basically I think what we can say is that, first of all, let's go back to the current scenario. Right now we actually have a law. I think it's probably in the next slide, where we actually see that the oil is getting more challenging. I think I mentioned this before, right? It's very, very challenging to actually tap the oil in compartmentalized bypass oils. The easy oils are no more, right? So we're getting into a very challenging time. So therefore, and then the low oil price, comparing the low oil price, is just getting the oil out is not just technically more challenging, but also commercially more challenging, right? So you can see in this map, I think it's from the public domain, you can see this. This is the kind of reservoirs that we're after nowadays, right? Highly compartmentalized, and they're just not easy, right? And then we talk about the low oil price, as mentioned just now, and I think that's on the next slide. You could see that there was, for a number of years, the oil price has been going up, right? And then you see that suddenly at some point it's like the fire hose suddenly started opening, and the oil price gushing in, and then you have a big crash in the oil price.
We have company, they are actually happy to actually not having to deal with oil by, let's say, 2050, because many of the company are going green. Petronas, Shell, Chevron, they are going on to this. Instead of classifying being as an oil and gas company, they would prefer to be classified as a technology or an energy company. So are you worried on that, since we are in this industry, right? So what's your view on that?
Okay. You can even see, you brought a very important point, because you can see that companies, even the names of the companies have changed. Like, for example, Statoil. Oil is no longer there. It's Equinor, right? And they're actually getting into the biggest offshore wind farm in the world, right? So we're not talking about oil and gas
renewables.
So some say that this is because of the investors or the shareholders' influence or the public influence, especially in Europe, of going green. But you can see that, some of the companies are actually getting into those areas, right? And then some companies are saying we are proud that we're not going to have oil anymore in 2050 to worry about. Wow,
I think you should be very worried.
it's, of course, TNF or the RFD will be very worried. but
You're shaking.
shaking, right? But of course, we all know oil is going to be there, no doubt about it. And we all know that potentially the share of the pie is going to go into national oil companies. But we hear these changes and we see these changes, and they are happening. Oil is definitely needed for years and years to come, right? But I think that's where we need to basically future-proof ourselves and basically somewhat diversify as well.
Do you think that there will be like lower price is just one of the uncertainty, right? But there could be more uncertainty in the future onto the petroleum overview of petroleum engineering?
Definitely. We talk about the technical challenges, we talk about the commercial challenges, and we also have the issues with the resources as well, right? So, for example, the big crew change that happens in the 80s, right? So you have experienced people, experienced retirees moving out of the industry, but then we have this big, huge gap, and then the newcomers, the young generations coming in, but they probably don't have enough mentoring or coaching and enough exposure to
knowledge to
so that could be another uncertainty in the industry as well.
Yeah.
So how do we manage all this uncertainty in your opinion?
Well, there's definitely things are changing, so the way we manage problems also have to change. So if we basically can go into, I think I might have that in a few slides after this, but basically if we think about the challenges that we have, right, with the technical, commercial, and the resources, there's three challenges, the three crises. So we need to basically, especially the younger populations getting into the oil and gas industry, they need to be able to equip themselves with different different software, not just RFD software, but the software up here has to change.
Yeah, the mindset has to be changed. And I think that actually linked to one of your slide that mentioned about Elon Musk. Of course, all of us know he is one of the inspiration leader that I think all of us at least heard of this person. I think why he's being so inspiration leader is maybe you would like to elaborate more on that particular content on Elon Musk and his technology.
That's very key, because the time between the time that I prepared something on Elon Musk on the slide, things have changed. So he got something else. So last Friday he actually released, I think there was I haven't watched it myself, but on Neuralink, basically implanting chip or something like that to the human brain interface.
Yeah, I think I saw that.
You saw that, right?
Yeah.
So of course, I think they're actually doing that they're actually doing trials on humans right now.
Thank goodness.
So
interfacing,
there's a Netflix series that talk about this as well.
What is
it's
it?
called a Black Mirror.
Yes, Black Mirror.
Fascinating.
You can save the memories to your chips and you can replay it.
Rewind and replay.
So it's not just in the movies. Of course,
it's
there's a huge implication in terms of the medical industry and the way we interface with machines and computers and AI. But the way getting back into Elon Musk is really the way he has revolutionized not just one industry but many industries, right? So he has this Tesla, and then he has this
SpaceX,
right? I mean,
boring company.
Boring company, which is not boring, just boring.
Handling, right?
Handling, yeah. So think about it. It's so mind-boggling that he got into the space industry, for example, the SpaceX. But it's not just that. He basically most of us have problems reversing our cars, right? But what he's doing is
reverse parking.
Reverse parking, but he's
reverse parking. Rocket. He got a lot of crazy idea, but I think I like all of us, right? We always have a lot of crazy ideas before we call it a day or before we go to sleep. But very maybe 0.1% of people who actually make it work. Make it into implementation, and that's one of him. And what do you think, how we can bring this to the oil and gas?
So he's not just turning dreams into reality. I think the way he basically sees the reality, because the way he asks questions, I mean, usually, okay, you want to do something, you ask the next best person for the experienced person, how do you do it? What are steps A, steps B, step C, step D? But he's not that kind of guy. He will say, how does these things work? And so basically he's the one creating steps A, steps B, steps C for everybody else. So like the battery cars, it's not impossible. I mean, it's impossible. It's too expensive. But he wanted to understand, so he made it available, right? So that's how he got Tesla, working in the first place. So yeah, in terms of getting now into the oil and gas, is the first principle thinking. Like, how does this work? And so when we need to basically understand or face technical challenges. We look at it from what's the physics behind this, rather than which equations do I want to use, or which buttons do I want to click, right? So it's more like, okay, in this case, for example, in this slide, we actually have two different fault blocks, and then the key is basically to find the remaining oil in a smaller fault block, as because energy is moving from high pressure to low pressure, and it's moving the oil. So we need to chase the oil by understanding the energy. So that's just one example of the first principle thinking, right?
Yeah, I actually have one question. Speaking about the, you say visualization is the key, and we usually talk about the reservoir simulation. We use it to visualize the purpose, but back in the days, we have this analytical method. We have the classical engineering, such as the DCA studies, such as the material balance studies as well. So what do you think? Like nowadays, we still see people tied to the old ways of doing things, or simply because it's limited by technology. What's your view on that, on leveraging between onto reservoir simulation instead of the analytical or classical methods?
I think I won't get kicked out of this room. I think there's actually places for both, right? The MBAL, the DCA, the classical analysis, and also the call it the high tech, whatever, the reservoir simulation. And as I mentioned before, things are getting more and more difficult, right? The reservoirs are more challenging, and each reservoir is kind of unique. If you think about it, there's like our fingerprint, right? So each reservoir is unique. So you can leverage on the computing power, and you do need to, but you also need to leverage on the understanding of it, such that you can zoom into the the shape, or how roughly the fingerprint looks like for the reservoir. Then you can use the full power of computing capability that you have to get to the endpoint, right? So, but you have to start somewhere, and you have basically then you use the technology for that. So there's, like I said, there's places for both, and I would say actually that maybe another step in the technology is basically merging these two together, make them even more user friendly, combine, right? So basically, when you prepare for one, you basically prepare for both, right? When you want to prepare for your MBAL, basically you prepare for your simulation, or vice versa.
I think as time goes, right, progress over the decades. Usually in the past, people were actually limited by limited computational power, single core computations. So nowadays we have something called a parallel computations, which is you can maximize the number of computation in your workstation without, or your cluster. Now we have the cloud as well. So that is actually one of the main things that I think many people in industry is still not aware of that. We can leverage onto technology such as GPU as well.
Yeah. I think when you get to more and more complex reservoirs, there's something that you need. And not forgetting the classical analytical aspects. Now we talk about the the first principle thinking is really useful for basically to solve problems, but then we get into how do we solve problems. So basically thinking out of the box is basically a skill that is very much required for any engineers nowadays. So you can't just be pressing buttons, because then you will likely be phased out by technology, right? But what we need more and more are the creativity, the thinking behind it to basically drive this technology. So we're not talking about AI, maybe not in 5 years time or 10 years time, but we're thinking more on the augmented AI. Right? So that's where the power comes in. So it's not like I saw the other day somebody said, oh, what do you think about geology versus machines? So it's not really that. It's actually combining both. So in this example, you have this problem solving. It's an example of the problem solving skills. This is actually in a published SPE paper. You basically have one horizontal producer and one horizontal injector, and somehow you get high water cut production from almost from day one. So what they did was they actually injected this conformance treatment, some sort of a gel that reacts with water. But somehow the capacity of the injector dropped to 10%. But they couldn't really understand it. This is actually in Qatar where they drilled 20,000 foot well, right? So there was a lot of hypotheses like, oh, okay, the conformance is basically just creating skin, blah blah, like so many different categories. So what we did was we took the data that we have, and basically, and we forgo the conventional model because we know the conventional model doesn't work because people couldn't really explain what's happening with the conventional model. So we actually use a fractured well. This well is not fractured, but we actually use a fractured well to describe what's happening. I won't go into the details, but basically the well now, because of the conformance and the gel basically clogging the borehole and shutting off production from 90% or injection from 90% of the well, it behaves as if it's a finite conductivity fractured well. So that's how we solve the problem, right? So I think indeed, so these are the kind of problem solving thinking. Once we understand the first principle, once we apply that, then we take into account the problem solving thinking where we have to go outside the envelope so that we can solve problems that we have never really solved before. That's really where we add value.
Yeah, I remember that back in your, I think 3 years ago, we worked on one particular interesting thing that you are trying to do here in tNavigator is, so what we do here is actually we overlay the seismic information from the GNG, and you want to overlay it with the well trajectory and some of the dynamic information like the projection data. So I won't say that I 100% what you're trying to do here, but maybe in front of the, I think all of us here, you can take this opportunity to elaborate more what we try to achieve in this case here for your Bayan project.
Okay.
Yeah.
So your past has caught up with me. Right. What we have there is basically the seismic, like as you said, overlap with reservoir engineer. So as a reservoir engineer, I don't, I like to see it from a practical point of view. You basically need to make use of as much data as possible, and from the different domains. So I do hope to see more of this happening where we basically integrate the different disciplines, because seismic or geology will give us a clue, and then reservoir engineering will give us a different kind of
different
information. So once we combine it, it's like a jigsaw puzzle, right? And then we can then form a better picture of what we're looking at. But I don't think we can go another days where we can have different disciplines in different silos, and you can even see the way people form their teams. They're not so much more into disciplinary.
Somebody who can do a hybrid job.
Communicate with the other disciplines, and it needs to happen really, really fast. So this is where I appreciate the technology here, because we could really, and if it's going to take 3 months to just integrate the different disciplines, people are not going to be really motivated to do so, right? So in this case, it's just, okay, one quick email to you or something like that to understand how it's done, and we could get it done in a very short time, right? So, and provided, of course, you have a very collaborative working environment. If your seismologist would, hide his data and would not like to share, then it doesn't work as well. So teamwork is very, very important, definitely. But this is where we actually managed to, locate bypass oil. So things that have not, were really unseen or not detected for the last, I think it's more than 10, 15 years ago, right? So it was just, the oil was just sitting there, right? So we did the study, we basically managed to locate the bypass oil and, and drill the well and found the oil for sure, right? So that was a really, really good, I think these are some of the moments where you look at it in your career and say, okay, these are the things that we did right, and we can learn from it. And then even, the next generation will, will benefit from the revenue coming from this, right?
Yeah. Speaking from the, I think since all of us, we are from the technology supplier perspective, right? So I want to hear more on you are as a consultant for over 20 years. So what needs to be in the software in the next, let's just say that in the next 5 years, from the perspective that having AI, machine learning algorithm to do, for example, optimizations, history matching. How do you see the trend on going that directions?
I think we will see more and more augmented AI. Definitely. I think I mentioned that. For example, I think the industry is going to change, not just oil and gas. The service industry is going to change rapidly. And talking about uncertain futures and the future of petroleum engineering, even pilots are not spared, for example, right? So recently, you never before this hear about pilots not having out of jobs. But then one day the pilots they're flying aircrafts, and then the next day they're delivering Grab or something like that, right? Because we really getting into
the answer is not limited to oil and gas anymore.
Exactly.
It's in every single industry because of the current new normals.
Yeah, there was one book that I'm reading. I think it's called Connecting the Dots by former chairman of Cisco, if I'm not mistaken, James Chambers. Very interesting. He said that if you are not disrupting, you will be disrupted. Right. So I think this is also not just at the company level, but also at the individual level. So we need to basically leverage on the technology and equip ourselves and multi skills and so on. So in terms of the technology, you can basically see that, for example, the reason why I came into how the technology changes, GPT-3, for example, and if you never heard about it, you can basically describe what you want to do with the software, or what software you want to do, and some of the codes will come into play. So I mean, it will literally create the codes for you instead of you coding it. So you can think about the impact on customer service and so on. So I can really see that some of these technologies will be going into the software.
What is GPT-3?
GPT-3 is the natural language processing AI technology. So it's more like the chatbots, but very, very advanced ones, because it's been trained with a very large database. So it's immense knowledge as we put there, right? So
basically it puts the machine learning algorithm into the software.
Exactly, right? And then the clever thing is that the basic technology can be then applied or easily used on other areas as well. So we will see that GPT-3 will be answering your phone in the next 5 years, right? You can have normal conversations and will maybe 80% understand you, right?
Wow.
So you can easily make flight booking and make appointments with your doctors and even describe your symptoms somewhat, right?
Back to us. What do you think TNF can do in the next 5 years?
So make it easier for the engineers, the geologists, the scientists to work with the data.
Basically, maybe you can talk to TNF.
Yeah, that's true.
Indeed. So I think you will see also description you will not just see the model, but I think in the future we actually see the description of the model itself in natural language, not in numbers that we can't really understand. So those are some of the areas that I think we will basically see happening. Seismic, I think, in maybe not next 2 or 3 years, but definitely quite a bit in the future. I think there's so much potential in that. Production data, I think we will see that in the near future.
Yeah, I think the reason why I think we ask a lot on the AI stuff as well is because you are doing a startup that relate to AI algorithm implementation and put it into your own software as well. So you want to share more on how's your journey is going to be like. How do you actually come up with the idea that to start all of this?
I think the key is to basically, sometimes people want to invent something for the sake of inventing it, but that doesn't usually work very well. But when you come in a sense that, okay, I have a problem to solve, and then basically that's how I started. I know, how do we visualize these multidimensional problems with history matching, for example? We have 3 different blocks, 3 different fault transfer pressure, 3 different probabilities, 3 different volumes. So all of this and they're talking to each other. So very complex. So how do you basically visualize this, even though human brains can only visualize 3-dimensional? Like I said in the beginning, I'm very much a person who needs to visualize it, right? So I say, okay, what do I have? So I look for multi-regression software, non-existent. You can try to plug in equations, but that's as far as you can go. So there wasn't really anything, especially the one that works with just 20 reservoir simulations data. Right? So that's why I started, okay, maybe I could create something on Excel spreadsheet. But I was so naive at that time in time. But I keep on working on it until myself and a few others started to realize that, this is something that we could actually solve. And we did. So basically, we reverse engineer how the brain sees the pattern. Right? And reverse engineer that to an algorithm. The algorithm may not mimic the human brain, but we think that's how the human brain works. And as long as it works, so if your algorithm can see 3 dimensions, algorithmically, then it breaks the barrier of human brain being able to see 3 dimensions, because then it can handle 20 dimensions.
Like back to what you said earlier, basically visualization is the key for you. In order to, we need to see it in order to solve the problems.
Exactly, and then in terms of integration between disciplines, right? So visualization allows us to basically see the problem, right? From seismic, petrophysics, reservoir engineering point of view. So it's not just looking at wells and so on. I think it's go beyond that. We want to be able to visualize our data in with different perspective. I think that's what technology will enable us to do. So we not replace humans, but yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, okay.
I think we are coming to the end of our session. Yes, we will open the floor to all your questions now. Let's see. Okay. We're gonna wait for a few more minutes and see if there's any questions.
Yeah, I think Derek, you were waiting for the questions. You brought up, I think what we haven't touched upon is in terms of getting ourselves equipped for the future. Right. So we talk about first principle thinking generally, and we talk about problem solving, skills, thinking out of the box. So that's something that needs to be sharpened. And then and the other one is leveraging on technology. I think along there is actually multi-scaling, right? So basically, I think I mentioned
multitasking as well.
Multitasking,
diversifying your
knowledge base, right? So I think I can touch upon what I read recently, quite interesting. Scott Adams. He was actually a cartoonist who became a famous cartoonist.
Dilbert, creator of Dilbert.
Creator of Dilbert, that's right. Who basically he's now a New York Times columnist. That's right, Wall Street Journal columnist. So how did he, move from one area to the other? So I think we don't really have to move out of oil and gas, but within oil and gas there are other domains that we can explore. So that multi-skilling is very, very key. And sometimes we feel pressured because I don't have the time in the work. But I read somewhere as well that you can possibly reinvent yourself every 5 years. So give yourself maybe a few years, right? Not one weekend, to basically master a new skill, master a new sub-skill, right? Diversify your portfolio. So I think somewhere, I think Scott Adams also said that for every skill that you have, you double your value or market value. You double basically, right? So suddenly you are 100% better than what you were previously. And he's also the one who said that you don't have to be the master of a skill, as long as you are at the top 25% for more than one areas. Top of 25%, right? More than one areas, then suddenly your value will increase significantly as well. So if you're thinking about being a master in something, spending 10,000 hours doing it, you probably feel demotivated, but top 25%, yeah, I can do that, right? You possibly, okay, I can be a podcaster, something like that, right? Or come reservoir engineer, author or whatever, So these kind of things that can prepare us more for the future. Yeah.
Great. Yeah. So I'm not sure. Is there any questions coming in?
Our attendees are quiet today. But I have a question for you. For all those fresh graduates, what do you think is the best way for them to get into petroleum engineering?
Right. I think that is a very, very important questions. I myself, when I first got into oil and gas, I didn't have the challenges that fresh graduates now face. Now we have even in Malaysia, you have UTM, UTP, APU, Curtin, UCSI. I don't want to forget and also others, UMS, and a lot of universities actually UITM offering oil and gas. So so the key is to basically stand out, right? To stand out. And then there's two secrets to that. The easiest way to remember, I think I mentioned this in my YouTube channel as well, no problem, right? And not that it's not a problem, it is a problem, but remember it's no problem. So the N in no stands for networking.
Okay.
And P in problem stands for portfolio. Right, so basically you want to be able to start early, whether you are networking or whether you are building a portfolio. you want to start early and okay, let me get back into the portfolio. Portfolio is something that is not done as part of university curriculum. It can be related project in oil and gas, meaning a toolkit, special spreadsheet, special programs. It could be a special research that you have done, anything that is a little bit out of the ordinary. That when you bring it to the recruiters, they will say, wow, these guys have the passion, for example, right? So networking is getting people in the industry. So it's not just getting the recruiter a few years before you are being interviewed, okay? It's also about knowing the industry and getting to know, how it's like working, what are the critical important aspects that I need to absorb and so on. I think that really shows your passion, and it can only help you by getting into the network as early as possible. And I hear even experienced people regretting that they're not in the network. So it's not just fresh graduates. I think experienced people can do better in terms of networking, myself included, basically because technical people tend to be more into their own thing, right? But I think it helps to basically networking, and it's not just for the sake of networking. You basically allow yourself to share your knowledge and wisdom with your experienced individual, right? And let the others learn. And we talk about this big crew change. So this is one way for you to basically help out. And I think one of the key thing is I learned along the way is that the more you give, the more you get back. Seriously, and
Fair enough,
it's
yeah.
like the cure for everything, really. Yeah.
That's true. We have questions. So we have one from Mr. Antoine. Okay, question number 1. You suggest multi-skilling. The psychometric makeup of a geologist is sometimes different to that of an engineer. Do you see this as a barrier?
That's a very good question, Antoine, right? So
Yeah.
very good question.
Antoine.
I heard that some people say that geologists have the unfair advantage. The reason being, and I heard it seriously, reason being that they are so used to working with data, right? So basically now we're basically seeing more and more geoscientists getting into data science, right? Not just geologists or geophysicists as well, right? But also petrophysicists. Now they're used to looking at data that is just so natural for them to move. I think that's also why there are more petrophysicists looking into the stock market as well. It's because the stock market is actually the vertical log. Turn upside down to the other way around from portrait to landscape.
To landscape, yeah.
Yeah, it's just so if you used to working with data, and then as you see more and more of the geoscientists moving into the data domain, so the data science, and you see courses being made for geoscientists to get into data science. I think in some of my slides you see basically research and development centers being formed, and this consists of geoscientists and whatnot getting into this different domain, so-called different domain, right? But basically it's all about dealing with data as well, and you don't have to know too much coding at all, because people have this apprehension that it's difficult, but things are getting much easier. And we talk about GPT-3 where you can just describe that. So I think few years time that will just come into play. As long as you know the basics, as soon as you know the first principle about it, I think it's going to get much easier. Right?
Then would you encourage anyone in the oil and gas industry to learn about the data science as well?
Yeah, I think definitely that's the wave of the future. So some people say, okay, what tools do I need to learn and so on. So I would say because tools change, the data science tools change a lot over the years, and I think it will keep on changing. So learn the basics. Yeah, I think that's quite important. And I think some of this will actually help us to solve the problems that we are facing. And it definitely did help me to, in a way of thinking about how we can approach our technical problems. Definitely. So I won't say just data science, but whatever area where you have your strength. Remember what I said about the top 35%? You can basically use your skills to combine them to make up something that contribute in a unique way, right?
That's right.
Thanks a lot for sharing. I'm not sure, is there any questions?
We have one last one actually from Mr. Ayman. Let me check. Okay, another one from multi-skilling. Okay, with regards in multi-skilling and increasing our value in the future, how do we know which skill we should pick up first? Is it based on interest or demand? Thank you for that question.
Okay. Yeah, very interesting question. That reminds me of the, I think it's Japanese term called ikigai.
Is that a book?
I think there are books written on it.
Yeah.
There's a book on it. I've seen at least one book on it. And I
Is
popular.
it
But
balance or?
and ikigai is the intersection of your strength and what is needed and what you will be paid for. Right? So once you have this sweet spot, you will be more or less in the zone because you're doing what interests you, your strengths, and what is there's demand for it, and you can sustain your livelihood because you will be paid for it. Right? So I would say try to find something along these lines that these intersections. And maybe if you can't find something yet, at least 2 out of 3 of that you tick the boxes. So that is the key. And the first and foremost is, I think, if you whichever one you need to focus on your strength. Right? Because once you focus on your strength, you will be so good at it that you can't be ignored. And that's a title for another book. Be so good that you can't be ignored, something like that. Right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Please share me those topic of the books later on. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, I think we have come. Oh, there's one more. Sorry. Let's see. Okay, what is the one thing we aren't doing today but should be in unconventional reservoir simulation from Claude? Yes, thank you.
Okay, very interesting question. What we are not doing in terms of unconventional reservoir engineering.
Yeah.
Okay, this is very interesting because unconventional engineering is really not my area per se, right? But I think the answer is applicable to in general. If I try to answer in a general way, actually it's also applicable in other areas as well. The key is when we talk about unconventional or areas which are the frontier, the frontiers of new kind of problems that we need to solve and so on, is that sometimes we are too quick to jump into a solution. And we not you wanna basically find the balance between short term and long term, right? You don't want to get into perfection because then you will never execute. But you don't want to ignore the current problem facing you right in the face. So I think using the right technology, but also basically doing some R&D. You always need to start early in terms of research and development, right? So, and I think there's some areas that have been pushed in terms of questions, in terms of the research, and there's a number of academicians, for example, are doing it. But I think the industry as a whole is a bit slow into moving into research. So they need to be the academic world and industry needs to work together for us to come up with more relevant research, right? And I think those in the academia have challenges getting into the industry, and the industry also have challenges in going to academia. So by having this cross, what do you call this? Working together,
Cross-discipline,
and cross collaboration. I think we open more doors than one.
I think that's also one of the main objective for this podcast is to get your share to us about what's your view on that. I guess many of us get to benefit from each other based on the topic that we discussed today, not just from as a technology supply perspective, and also how from I think you've been using tNav for the past maybe 6-7 years, right? How you view this software being one of, I think, the leading technology in the years to come, right?
I think what's interesting is how tNav is getting into the static domain, for example. I think what impressed me so far is you can really see seismic. You can go into see the seismic amplitudes very quickly. And I would really like to see the day where we can move very quickly between the dynamic model and the seismic. I
Yeah.
think that will takes.
Yeah, we
That's
call
the
that the integrated static dynamic uncertainty, right? Which is combining uncertainty in both and do one full loop of the uncertainty management and history matching for forecasting, right?
Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much to all of our attendees for the questions, and thank you, Mr. Zaim.
Yes, be my pleasure.
It was
Even though I was
quite an
thinking-
insightful one. Thank you so much, everyone, and that's a wrap for today's session. I guess we will see you this Thursday at 2:30 p.m. GMT, and we're gonna have one of our other guest speaker coming in, and he's gonna be talking about the best practices in water flood management, and he is Mr. Ronnie Gunarto from PTTEP Malaysia. Again, thank you so much, Mr. Zaim. If you guys are interested to get more insights and educational info, please reach out to Mr. Zaim at
ZaimAwang.com.
zaimawang.com. zaim@zaimawang.com.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Derek. And we will see you on Thursday.
See you.
See you.
Have a great day, everyone.